revealed in the holy city of Mecca. Rasulullah is one of them. Every the last messenger amongst you, from you, you know him. People cannot be worse than shaitan. Therefore,
أعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم.
the 15th chapter from the Holy Quran, Surah Hijr, was revealed in 99 verses in the holy city of Mecca. And Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala entitled the 15th chapter after the tribe of the Prophet Salih, Salih, who lived in the Arabian Peninsula 700 years before Christ. Why would Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala choose to name an entire chapter within the Holy Quran after the nation of Salih, after the people of Salih? And why is it that the 15th chapter from the Holy Quran played an extremely important role in the emotional being and the emotional state of the Muslim community in Mecca? In order for us to answer this question and to understand Sabab al-Nuzul, the reason behind dissension of this chapter, we must study the environment in which the Muslim community lived in the beginning of Islam, at the birth of Islam, in the holy city of Mecca. What was it like to be a Muslim living in Mecca in the beginning days of the establishment of the religion of Islam? History tells us that the Muslim community, the small number of individuals, were amongst the most oppressed people in the course of history. There were poor, impoverished individuals facing heartless, malicious, violent members of Quraysh within the Arabian Peninsula. At the beginning of Islam, the leaders of 25 tribes gathered under the leadership of Quraysh, and they decided to establish a torture home within the city of Mecca, close to the Kaaba, for every person who enters the religion of Islam. So they would take people who have converted to the religion of Islam into this torture home and torture them in public. And most of them would die under the severe torture. The parents of Ammar, Yasir and Sumayya, were the very first martyrs in the religion of Islam. They were taken by the pagan Arabs, and they would be tortured on a daily basis so that the people would see, so that the Arabs would watch and they would think twice before hearing the words of Rasulullah. That is why some of them were so afraid to hear the words of the Quran and the propagation of Rasulullah. It would resonate in their hearts, and then they would have to convert to Islam. They would put their fingers in their ears while passing next to Rasulullah so that they would not hear the words of the Quran, because it was said to them that the Quran has a magical message. So they literally thought that if they were to hear the Quran, this magic would infiltrate their minds and their souls and their existence, then they would have no other way but to accept Islam. So they would actually refrain themselves, physically refrain themselves from having to hear the words of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. The Muslim community was suffering in such a manner. And then they were all forced Talib, and Abu Talib protected them. Some of them were literally taken away from their families. For example, if the wife's family came from a powerful tribe, they would come and they would take her away from her Muslim husband. Or vice versa. If the wife had converted to Islam, then the family of the husband would come and separate him from his Muslim spouse. Similarly, the children at the age 15, 16, 17, if they converted to the religion of Islam, then the tribe would separate them from their families. And I spoke to you of the story of Mus'ab ibn Umair. Mus'ab ibn Umair, who was stripped out of his clothes. His father was the richest man in the Arabian Peninsula, yet he sent him out of his home bare naked, stripped away from his clothes because he had converted to the religion of Islam. And it was considered the biggest disgrace for people to become Muslim. In such an environment, with such a surrounding, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reveals the 15th chapter, telling them that look at the people of Salih, Thamud. Don't look at your weak numbers today and the power and the might of the Arabs. Look at Thamud, who also lived in the Arabian Peninsula. And if you just look up Thamud on Wikipedia or Google or, for example, YouTube, you realize this was one of the most astonishing nations that ever lived on the face of this earth. 700 years before Christ, those people were building mansions within rocks. And I don't mean small homes. Mansions, beautiful mansions built in the center of the rocks, the center of the mountains. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala describes them to be a powerful nation. I mean, imagine having to engrave a mansion within a mountain with corridors, with walkways, with different halls, many rooms, entrances, all within mountains, all within rocks. They even had designs at the entrance of the homes. They even engraved what was attributed to the owner of the home. For example, if he was somehow related to certain animals or birds or a certain lifestyle or certain culture, he engraved this at the entrance of his home. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, look at them, and the fact that they were rejectful towards Islam, they enjoyed all the bounties, but yet they did not appreciate seeking nearness and obedience to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, and therefore they were destroyed and belittled. And today, if you look at those individuals of the Arabian Peninsula and how they are rejectful, one day they will also be belittled. If Allah wishes, things will be changed. And this is exactly what happened. Not long after that, Rasulullah, with those powerless, hungry ex-slaves, were able to liberate Mecca. Those powerless people walked into Mecca while the mighty powerful people of Quraysh then had to come and stand in front of Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam and beg him for mercy. So they said to him, Ya Rasulullah, what are you going to do with us today, now that Allah has given you the power over us? What will you do with us? Rasulullah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam says, what do you think I'm going to do with you? They say, Ya Rasulullah, we are in hope of your mercy and compassion. We know that you are a compassionate person. So he says to them, اذهبوا فأنتم طلقاء. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala revealed this chapter to inspire the Muslim community, to tell them to strengthen their faith and their iman in Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Another reason is because just like Allah chose a prophet from the people of Salih for them, Qawm Thamud, Allah also chose Muhammad from one of the Arabs. He was one of them. They knew him. They knew his family, and they traced him back to the Prophet Ibrahim. And he was known as Sadiq al-Amin. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala in chapter 7 describes the relationship of Salih and his people. He says, وَإِلَىٰ ثَمُودَ أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحًا. And to Thamud, he chose their brother Salih, meaning he was a brother to them. They all knew him. How can you reject a man that was born and raised amongst you, who you know through his piety, knowledge, iman, taqwa, trustworthiness? How can you reject him? Similarly, Allah is telling the Arabs, your situation is exactly like the situation of Salih. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala chose the last messenger amongst you, from you, you know him. You refer to him as As-Sadiq al-Amin, the trustworthy. You're the one that ensure your amanat and trusts with him. Today, he tells you that I am a prophet and you reject him. Third reason behind the relevance between the story of the Prophet Salih and the Muslim community until today is because Allah is trying to make an extremely important point here. Allah did not import a prophet from a different nation to the Arabs. He did not import a prophet to them from a remote location and tell them that this person is going to be your prophet. But he chose one individual from them, amongst them. Similarly, Allah refers to Salih as one of their own, a brother to them. Meaning what? Meaning he knew their culture. He spoke their language. He ate the same food. He understood their difficulties. He was one of them. Today, in many of our Muslim communities, the person in leadership position educating the Muslim community must be an individual who they can relate to and understand. If Allah knew that importing was going to work for communities, He would have sent them an angel. And Allah says this in the Quran. He says, but the reason why we did not choose angels is because we want the community of believers, the community that the Prophet has been sent to them, to relate to him. So he knows their pains. He knows their difficulties. He knows, for example, what it feels to have to grow up in the United States of America or in the West. He speaks their language. He understands their slang. They can relate to him. And then it becomes more convincing to them to follow him, to understand him, with being relevant. Many of our youth, the reason why they remain outside those four walls, the reason why they have no interest in faith is not because they dislike the religion of Islam, or they have no interest in seeking knowledge in regards to Islam, or they have no interest in participating in religious activities. No, that's not the case. I believe the main reason is because they cannot relate to what's going on. Especially if there are speakers who come and speak for an hour and 20 minutes, 30 minutes of the speech is poetry, and it's difficult poetry, in a different language. They're not used to this poetry. And they're thinking, what kind of religious activity is this? How is this increasing my iman? How is this increasing my knowledge of my faith? When I leave this lecture, how am I going to better understand the Quran? How am I going to better understand, for example, Nahj al-Balagha, or Sahif al-Sajjadiyya, or Kitab al-Kafi, or Man la yahdaruhu al-Faqih? How is this increasing in my spirituality? Therefore, in order for us to find success within our Islamic institutions, we must be able to deliver the message in a relevant sense. Let me elaborate on this point for a couple of seconds, because time is very limited. We have many imams, many masjids, mashallah, many imam bargas and many imams. Imams, by imams I mean the ones who lead the prayers. Or else we only have 12 imams. And many of them, they don't speak English. After 20 years, 30 years of living in this country, they don't speak English. Why? Because our community encouraged this form of illiteracy. Why? Because the Maulana, the Sheikh, the Sayyid, the Alim, he doesn't need to learn the English language when every Thursday and Friday and Saturday and Sunday he speaks his own language from the pulpit, whether it's Urdu, whether it's Arabic, whether it's Farsi. And the congregation wants to hear their own language of back home, Hindi, Gujarati. So they have not asked him to make an effort to learn the English language, and he has not found the need to go and learn English. So many of them, they don't speak English. And our children and our youth, and my children and youth, I mean even 30 and 40-year-olds sometimes, because they sometimes were born and raised in this country. At the age 40, he says, look, I was born here, I was raised here, I don't understand this language. I cannot relate to this. Many of them, they do not speak English. And by English, I don't mean hello, how are you? No, I mean to be able to give a lecture in English. And then the other ones who speak English sometimes, unfortunately, physically they don't live in the US. Physically they live in the US, but mentally they live elsewhere. So physically they're here in New Jersey, but mentally, Karachi, Islamabad, Qom, Basra, you know, whatever country they come from. And this is the reason why we find the congregation coming to an Islamic lecture not so enthusiastic to take part in religious activity, because it does not relate to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala within the Quran says what? أَخَاهُمْ صَالِحٌ, their brother Salih, meaning he related to them. Rasulullah is one of them. Every single prophet, the 124,000 of them, were amongst their own people. They spoke their language. They had their own culture. They related to them, and that is why they were effective onto them. Let us come to the 15th chapter from the Holy Quran. Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. It has many interesting and in-depth philosophical, spiritual discussions. The second verse from the 15th chapter, for those who want to use their Quran on their phones, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Rubama, perhaps, maybe, يَوَدُّ الَّذِينَ كَفَرُوا لَوْ كَانُوا مُسْلِمِينَ. Perhaps, maybe, the kuffar will desire to be Muslim. Now, one reason why we discuss where a chapter was revealed, whether whether it was Mecca or Medina, is because we want to better understand the verses from the Quran. Now we said this is mentioned, this is revealed in the holy city of Mecca. So would it make sense for Allah to say that those kuffar, perhaps, maybe they would desire to become Muslim? Of course not. They're being tortured, they're impoverished, they cannot travel. Why would they want to become Muslim? What's going to intrigue this desire into them? So many of the Mufassirin are under the impression that this ayah, the second verse of the 15th chapter, speaks of when? Speaks of the Day of Judgment. On the Day of Judgment, the kafir will desire to be Muslim. And this is a very important discussion. A discussion revolves around the ideology that only Muslims will receive salvation on the Day of Judgment. I mean, this is what the ayah is trying to say, right? On the Day of Judgment, the kafir will be regretful. He'll say, I wish I was a Muslim. And that is why you find some Muslims tell you that you have to be a Muslim in order to enter paradise. As long as you're Muslim, you enter paradise. If you're not Muslim, you don't enter paradise. The same mentality of the Christians, the same mentality of the Jews. However, we cannot create an Islamic principle, an Islamic law, an Islamic belief by only reading one verse from the Quran, or without examining the topic in its totality, from all aspects. Of course, there is an ayah, another ayah in the Quran says, إِنَّ الدِّينَ عِنْدَ اللَّهِ الْإِسْلَامِ. Faith and religion is defined by Allah as Islam. And Rasulullah, in a famous tradition quoted by Muslims, says, لا يدخل الجنة إلا من كان مسلما. Does not enter paradise a person unless they are Muslim. So in order for us to examine this ayah, first we have to examine the word kafir. ربما يود الذين كفروا, kafir, kufr becomes first, لو كانوا مسلمين, then the word Islam comes. So, in order for us to examine this ayah, let's see what kufr means. Kufr means to reject. Reject what? Reject Allah, Rasulullah, the Quran, the Day of Judgment. This is a definition of a person who has rejected. Now let me ask you something. If a person has not been introduced to Islam, what do they have to reject? If they're not introduced to Islam, they don't even know Islam, what is it that they're rejecting? So the people who don't know Islam, who Islam has not been introduced to them, cannot be called a kafir because they're not rejecting anything. You come and you offer me a plate of food and I reject this plate of food after your offer. But can you call me a rejecter before you've offered me the food? What am I rejecting if you haven't offered me the plate of food? You come and give me money. I will not say no, but this is hypothetical. I reject this money, and you say Sayyid rejected this money, so he did kufr in the money. True? That's why when Allah speaks of His blessings, on the contrary of the blessings, He uses the word kufr. Allah has given me this eye and this hand and the abilities that I have, but I reject them. Meaning what? I don't use them in the right way. I am rejectful of them. But I have had them. If somebody does not have eyes, can they be kafir in their eyes? No. Because this ni'mah does not exist in them. Anyhow. So those who have not been, some people say, but Sayyid, there isn't anybody who hasn't been introduced to Islam. Everybody's heard of Islam. Everybody knows what Islam is. I said this is a problem. What are they being introduced to? The Islam of Daesh, the Islam of Taliban, the Islam of beheadings, the Islam of amputating limbs, the Islam of violence, the Islam of division between men and women, the Islam of monarchy. What have they seen through the media? What have we showed them? Democracy, equality, justice, liberty, embracing the impoverished ones, allowing the immigrants to come to Muslim countries. What have they seen from Islam? This is not the introduction of Islam that they have rejected. This Islam we even reject, I reject. So why would they be attracted to such an Islam? People who have entered the religion of Islam in the West, go and ask them, who played a role in their Islam? Is it Muslims? Never. They're the ones that somehow got their hands on a copy of the Quran and they did research and they entered the religion of Islam without the help of any Muslims. 75% of those who enter the religion of Islam in the West, especially in America, do not meet a Muslim. They enter Islam on their own. And we say, MashaAllah, so many people are becoming Muslim. What do you have to do? You're saying it as if you played a role in this. You say it in a way as if you encouraged, you helped, you assisted. That is why we, the followers of Ahlul Bayt, like I said, in the month of Ramadan, we're in need of the guidance of the Quran, brothers and sisters. Let's put those cultural rituals aside. Let's gather up next to the Quran. Let the Quran be the central theme of your majalis. Today, if we come to an average follower of Ahlul Bayt, Shia, unfortunately, those things, like I said, they need to be changed. They need to be erased off our memory. New things need to come and sit here. You tell them, brother, can you give us $1,000 to create a taboot? Yes. Can you give us $5,000 for niyaz? Yes. Can you, for example, help us? We have a disagreement with our local Imam Barga, our local mosque, so we went to a strip mall and we're starting a new Imam Barga. And the name of Hazrat Abba, how can we say no? Here's $5,000. Okay, brother, can you give us $1,000 to translate books? There is a book that's authored, that's written, that's available for the youth, for example, for non-Muslims. Can you give us $10,000 to print this book? Can you help a research center, research of the Quran, research of comparative studies between Islam and Christianity, Islam and Judaism? People are not interested. They will not give. I tell you one thing, someone was telling me, Sayed, you know the nights that big families sponsor majalis? Full house. Because they call, they say, look, we're making the food, we have good food, so people go. How come people don't pick up the phone and say, there is good food for the soul? There's good food for your intellect, for your aql. Come and listen and learn. Therefore, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala defines kufr al-Islam in this ayah in this following manner. You reject what you know. The rejectors are the ones rejecting something tangible to them. Let me ask you, how many non-Muslims do you know that have been introduced to Islam fully, that understand Islam fully, but yet they still reject it? They understand everything. They know they're wrong in being non-Muslim. They understand the Prophet. They understand Ma'ad. They understand Tawheed. They understand the Quran, yet they reject it. I know none. Then he says, they wish they were Muslim. What is Islam here? As if that's me and you, we say, Ashhadu an la ilaha illallah, wa ashhadu anna Muhammadan Rasulullah. Is this the Islam we're talking about? Let's go to other verses in the Quran. Like I said, the Quran explains itself. Go to Surah Yusuf, chapter 12. Yusuf, after he went through this whole journey and he became a prophet and he became Aziz Misr and he became one of the most beloved prophets to Allah, in his last days, he's about to die, he's accomplished everything, Allah is pleased with him, he's pleased with Allah. He says, رَبِّ قَدْ آتَيْتَنِي مِنَ الْعِلْمِ. Oh Allah, you've given me knowledge. وَعَلَّمْتَنِي مِنْ تَأْوِيلِ الْأَحَادِيثِ. And you've given me the power of interpreting dreams. You have given me power and you have given me authority. تَوَفَّنِي مُسْلِمًا. Take me and depart me as a Muslim. Allah. Allow me to die as a Muslim. تَوَفَّنِي مُسْلِمًا وَأَلْحَقْنِي بِالصَّالِحِينَ. We also spoke of the Prophet Ibrahim. In which moment did Allah speak of his Islam? Ibrahim became Khalilullah, and then Allah, there is a moment in his life that speaks of him as a Muslim. What was the moment? The moment when he was about to sacrifice his son Ismail. Allah says, فَلَمَّا أَسْلَمَا وَتَلَّهُ لِلْجَبِينِ. When they both submitted. The Islam here is defined as submission, brothers and sisters. Whoever submits to Allah, whoever is rejectful will have regret. Whoever is submissive, and the day of judgment will receive victory. Don't follow titles. Islam says don't follow titles. How submissive were you to Allah? This is going to be your status in the day of judgment. It's not about the name. So Saddam, his name is Muslim. Osama bin Laden, his name is Muslim. Daesh, their name is Muslim. Mother Teresa, her name is not Muslim. This is not the name. This is not the Islam that Allah is discussing in this ayah. It is submission, and the month of Ramadan is the month of submission. The month we train ourselves to submit to Allah. To stay away from things that are even allowed because of the will of Allah. We exercise this for 1 month to train ourselves for the rest of the year. Now let us come to verse 39 onwards, where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala records a conversation between him and the shaitan. Very beautiful. Many of us think that once there is a person within our family who's leading a sinful life, they're sinners. We boycott them. We block them. We X them out. We excommunicate them. Why? This person is a sinner. I don't want to associate myself with them. I don't want to speak to them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, there is a reason why He records his encounter and discussion and dialogue with shaitan in the Quran. Meaning what? People cannot be worse than shaitan. Therefore, in no circumstance we are allowed to boycott them, especially if they are our family members. I cannot believe when I hear parents say, I boycotted my son, my daughter, my nephew. Why? Because they did such and such crime. They did such and such sin. They're sinful. I no longer want to associate with them. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala keeps the dialogue continuous even with shaitan. Who are we to boycott our family members? Yes, there is a difference of association and friendship. Sisters, hello? Yes, there is a difference between friendship and association. I don't mean for you to have a continuous friendship and social life with someone who leads a sinful life, because that's going to affect you. But boycotting them is something completely different. Imam al-Hussein, on the day of Ashura, he could have boycotted Hur. And Hur would probably not have joined his camp anymore. But on the 10th of Muharram, he came to him. He stood in front of him. He said, Assalamu alayka ya Aba Abdullah. Imam al-Hussein says, Wa alayka as-salam. Man ant? Who are you? He doesn't say his name. He says, Ya Aba Abdullah, ana alladhi ja'ja'a bikum at-tariq. Ya Aba Abdullah, I am the one that carries sin. I am the one that intercepted your caravan. I did wrong. Halli min tawbah. Is there a way for me to be forgiven? Imam al-Hussein says, Tub tab Allah. Ask for forgiveness and you shall be forgiven. Imam al-Hussein did not find this guilty man to make him feel more guilty, but he wanted to help him, allow him to rise. Sometimes we know individuals in our community, in our family, and they are hurtful. They regret their sin. But we think that we're the police watchdogs of Allah. We want to expose them. No, everybody has to know. Who told you everybody has to know? Allah has Ghaffar al-Dhunub, Sattar al-Uyub. Yet we think that it's our job to be the police of Allah. Boycott this person and expose this person and destroy the life of this person. And somehow we think that this is religious and this is going to make our families or our lives more spiritual or so-called more Islamic. So Allah records this conversation between him and Shaitan in the Quran. And then he says, Inna ibadi, Allah says to Shaitan, because Shaitan says, I will go after them to mislead them so they fall into sin. So Allah says, Inna ibadi, in the 42nd verse, Laysa laka alayhim sultan. My true servants, my ibad, you cannot go after them. They will not slip. Then, in the 49th ayah, Allah says this. Look at this beautiful ayah. Nabbi' ibadi. Then he says to Rasulullah. That was a conversation with Shaitan. This is a conversation with who? Rasulullah. Ya Rasulullah, inform my ibad, those who follow me, those who are created by me, those who worship me. Nabbi' ibadi anni ana ar-ra'uf ar-rahim, ana al-ghafur ar-rahim. Tell them that if Shaitan seduced you, if you were to fall into sin, I am the most forgiving, the most compassionate, the most merciful. You may make a mistake. After 10 times your parents don't forgive you. Your spouse will not forgive you. Children will disown you, will not have anything to do with you. They say you've made this mistake 50 times. But after the 50th time and the 100th time, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala still forgives. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala's door is still open. When you are in need, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, Ya Rasulullah, tell them, inform them that I am so welcoming to them. And the 56th ayah of the 15th chapter, listen to what it says. قَالَ وَمَنْ يَقْنُطْ مِنْ رَحْمَةِ رَبِّهِ إِلَّا الظَّالِمُونَ. Who's going to despair from the mercy of Allah except those who are lost? That is why the religion of Islam declares the second cardinal sin after shirk is losing hope in Allah. The greatest sin is shirk, and the second greatest sin is losing hope, saying, I have committed so much wrong, Allah will not forgive me. I have done so many mistakes. I do not see myself amongst those to be forgiven.
Wassalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah.